when you were working for the prime minister for Bibi Netanyahu, did he ever request that you make a Meorav?
No.
Never.
Never.
Did
Not
he?
once. I think, but okay. Some of his good friends would occasionally bring him a pita of Meorav Yerushalmi.
Like you saw that.
I saw that.
All right, cool.
Much, I didn't like them bringing food from outside, but I knew how much he loved it, and I couldn't really cook that at the house because I didn't really have the ingredients and the facilities to do it.
Welcome to 18 Jewish Foods, Culture and History in kosher bite-sized portions. This podcast tells the stories of iconic Jewish dishes, shedding light on the people who eat them. Here's your host, Joel Haber.
This episode of the podcast is scheduled to be released on Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day, a holiday that celebrates the reunification of Jerusalem in 1967. And so I felt that it would be appropriate to celebrate the day by using this episode to look at the cuisine of Jerusalem, and by extension, the foods of Israel in general. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and it is often used as a synecdoche for the entire country. For example, the term Zionism, which relates to Israel overall, is drawn from the word Zion, which is a synonym or another name for Jerusalem. But since this podcast typically looks at individual foods and ones that are genuinely Jewish, I will use one food in particular, plus a few more, that very much exemplify Jerusalem's food. The food I'm going to look at is one of actually 4 separate foods that actually have the word Jerusalem in their names. Now, of those 4 foods, 2 are genuine Jerusalem dishes that were invented here. One was invented elsewhere, but is more associated with Jerusalem than where it was invented. And one of them has nothing at all to do with Jerusalem. But actually, it is the most telling of all of them, in my opinion. The main one I'm going to look at is called Meorav Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem mix. This was invented in Jerusalem, right on the street that I live on, Agrippas, back in the late 60s, early 1970s. And this was a fairly poor city back then, so you didn't want to waste anything. If you slaughtered a chicken, you ate everything that was edible. So they took chicken hearts, livers, spleens, kidneys, some breast meat, some onions, and a whole bunch of spices. Grill it all up together on a big flat griddle, and like all good street foods in Israel, shove it into a pita. That not only is a genuine Jerusalem food, it is a food that I think reflects certain Jewish values. First of all, there's a whole host of foods that reflect a thrifty attitude. We don't want to waste anything, and we will make use of everything that's edible. This also relates, of course, to the general Jewish value of what we call bal tashchit. Don't waste things. And so to waste food, such a valuable commodity, is really verboten in Jewish culture. The second Jerusalem-named food is Yerushalmi kugel, or Jerusalem kugel. For those who don't know, I will be speaking a little bit more about kugels in general in an upcoming episode, but it is a typically Ashkenazi food that combines a starch of some kind, typically potatoes or noodles, with eggs and a fat, no added water typically, and it's all mixed together and baked as a sort of big casserole. The Jerusalem kugel is a noodle kugel, but the noodles in it are different than the ones typically that were used in Europe or are common in the United States of today. They're a much thinner noodle, a Middle Eastern type of a noodle, and that kugel is also flavored with caramelized sugar and black pepper. To me, the reason this was the kugel that was invented in Jerusalem, and it's an old Jerusalem food invented here about 190 or so years ago, is because kugel is 100% an Ashkenazic food, but 200 years ago in Europe, sugar and pepper were very expensive. So those are not old school Ashkenazic flavors. Those are more Eastern flavors. Taking an Ashkenazi food from west of Israel and combining it with the flavoring agents that come from the east of Israel, that's Jerusalem. I say it's Jewish unity in your mouth. The third Jerusalem-named food is what's known as a Jerusalem bagel. It is a big oval roll with sesame seeds on top. It's not really a bagel, but it is very much associated with Jerusalem, even though it was actually invented in Jaffa. Still in Israel, but not in Jerusalem. But more people in Jerusalem make it and eat it these days than in Jaffa, and so it became associated with here. It's worth noting, by the way, that even in Arabic, it is called a Jerusalem bagel. Maybe not a bagel, but a Jerusalem ring bread. It's called ka'ak al-Quds, which also means like a ring bread of Al-Quds is the Arabic name for Jerusalem. And despite the claims of Reem Kassis, a Palestinian-American cookbook author, there is no connection between this bread and bagel. I've written an entire blog post refuting this claim, and you're welcome to check that out on my blog. The fourth Jerusalem-named food is the Jerusalem artichoke. Neither from Jerusalem nor an artichoke. Discuss. So how does it get the name? The artichoke part, because its flavor is similar to artichoke, but the Jerusalem part, because what it actually is the root of a type of a sunflower. That's why it's also sold in the United States as a sunchoke. The way that you say sunflower in Italian is girasole, which sounds like Jerusalem, and that is how it got the name. But to me, like I said, that's the most telling of all. In my opinion, if the way you said sunflower in Italian was linadin, I don't think anyone would call it a London artichoke. Jerusalem is special. People for thousands of years from literally all over the world have dreamt about this city. And so you hear something that kind of sounds like it a little bit, and it lends a special magic to the name. So yes, to be clear, only the first two of those four qualify as Jewish by the criteria of this podcast, but there certainly are those two. But when we talk about Jerusalem, we have to understand that it is an international, multicultural, cosmopolitan city. And so I'm not in this episode only celebrating those Jewish foods that are genuine Jewish foods. I'm celebrating the foods of Jerusalem overall. That shared connection between people of many religions from all over the world is one of the very special elements of this city. So a little bit more about the Meorav itself. First of all, sometimes you'll see in restaurants, kosher restaurants in the States, that they'll sell the Jerusalem mixed grill, and it has nothing to do with the actual Jerusalem mix. They'll usually mix chicken with lamb or beef. No Meorav I have ever seen anywhere in Jerusalem has anything but chicken meat in it, maybe some turkey meat. And also, it must have the organ meats of the chicken, not just chicken breast. Without it, it's not really a me'orav. Now, the spices are very important too. Each place has its own spice mix, and that's a secret, and it varies from chef to chef. Furthermore, it is made on a big griddle, or what we might call here a plancha, which is really a Spanish word, but it will not be grilled, and it will not be roasted in an oven. Now, the origin story of this dish is interesting, about some guy who comes into one of these restaurants and it was late at night and they were almost closing and they didn't have much left, but they had these organ meats. So they threw them on back then they didn't even have an actual griddle yet. So they made a makeshift griddle, threw it on there with a bunch of spices and some onions and all that, and mixed it up and gave it to him. And that was the origin of the Meorav. But what's interesting is that in my research, I have found at least 4 different places, although 1 or 2 of them have closed subsequently, all of which are credited with inventing this genuine Jerusalem dish. And obviously that indicates, first of all, how tied to this city it is, but also how it's a folk food that just came about organically. And because of the different spicing that each one has, maybe they all invented a different version of Meorav. I don't know, and frankly, it doesn't matter to me. All that matters is that it's a good food, and you can come here and get it whenever you like. My guest for today to talk about Meorav Yerushalmi and a little bit more about Jerusalem food is Joe Corson. He's a chef who's been around the Jerusalem scene on and off for many years now, though he also worked for a time in England under Heston Blumenthal and Raymond Blanc, and in Jerusalem, he served for nearly 6 years as the personal chef to the Prime Minister of Israel. So I felt he was the perfect person to talk about Jerusalem food. So Joe, you've been involved with Jerusalem food on and off for decades.
Quite a while, yes.
Yeah. Let's start with the Meorav Yerushalmi, which is definitely a genuinely Jerusalem food. Do you happen to have, from your experiences, any specific either memories or stories that you can tell me about Meorav?
I have a lot of stories because of Chatzot, which is a long-standing Meorav Yerushalmi place in Jerusalem. But traditionally, I went there after drinking and getting drunk and having munchies, okay? So the memories of it are in that context, but it is an iconic place, and it's changed over the years.
There's a reason they call it Chatzot, midnight.
Right, exactly. So you'd go there at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, you get your pita filled with meat. You don't always know what's in that meat, but, you know, you got some hearts, you got some liver, you got some shishlik, you know, it's all mixed in there, and it's flipping full of oil and hummus and spice, and it's delicious.
When you were working for the prime minister, for Bibi Netanyahu, did he ever request that you make a Meorav?
No.
Never.
Never.
Did
Not
he?
once. I think, but okay. Some of his good friends would occasionally bring him a pita of Meorav Yerushalmi.
Like, you saw that.
I saw that.
All right, cool.
Much, you know, I didn't like them bringing food from outside, but I knew how much he loved it, and I couldn't really cook that at the house because I didn't really have the ingredients and the facilities to do it. But anyway, I would never match them. You know, whatever's in their secret spice and their secret oil. You get the pita, be wrapped up. I take it out of the bag. I put it on a plate. All the little chamutzim, you know, all the little pickles and shifka and all that. I put in a little plate for him. So yeah,
So you
even the
dressed
prime
it up.
minister, yeah, with each chatzot, Meorav Yerushalmi.
But from Chatzot.
From chatzot.
All right. And what about one of the other major Jerusalem named foods, Yerushalmi kugel, Jerusalem kugel? What's your experience with that, if at all?
Do you remember Pfefferberg's?
No.
Wow, this is old school. This is back in the 80s when I came here. It was a place that did all the Ashkenazi Jewish food.
So that was where you first encountered Yerushalmi kugel.
Yes.
And that's not something that you ate regularly
Never ate it
afterwards.
in my life until
And that's also, I'm assuming, not something that Bibi requested.
Never.
Never.
I don't think I ever made a kugel for Bibi.
Right. In your experience, like, you've seen the development of Jerusalem food. What are your impressions of how Jerusalem's food internally has developed?
Now you have a lot more variety, a lot more quality establishments that deliver really amazing food. And the street food scene here has grown tremendously. I would connect it with a lot of the immigration that came here. The quality of pastry here has grown since the French came. The variety of the different cuisines available and the openness to trying these cuisines. You know, Jerusalem is a melting pot of all the Edot, all the cultures that have come from around the world. Not just Jewish food, but Arabic food, Christian. You know, you've got a huge population of Armenians and their cuisine. I mean, it's just, if you really want a culinary adventure, Jerusalem is the place. Like, it's all over the place. Ethiopian. We didn't have all that before.
Which is interesting because there certainly were many, many different cultures whose people lived here.
Right.
Is it just that everybody prepared food at home?
Well, my best culinary experiences, obviously, was at people's homes. My best friend, who is Moroccan, his family, his mother would make up the most amazing hummus that you would never taste in any shop. You go to my friends in Montevalles, yeah, my Arabic friends, and they invite me over for makluba. And makluba is such an iconic dish in this area. And every village has a different version. But every time you go, it's one of my favorites, yeah? So a lot of my early experience were eating in the homes of people all this authentic cuisine. Now it's coming out. But yes, you're right. I think it came more from the homes of the people.
For example, Meorav is invented here.
I've only heard of it here, so I would agree.
So that's what I'm getting at, is that certainly there are those foods that are indigenous here.
Right.
Ishtabach, you know, when they make their shamburak, that is a genuine Jerusalem food. It's a Kurdish food, but it's not invented in Kurdistan. It was invented in Jerusalem by a Jewish Kurd.
You know, I think a lot of our cuisine also depends on what we have access to as an ingredients. So a lot of these yedot, the Iraqis would bring in spices. The Ethiopians brought in a whole new range of spices to Israeli cuisine, you know? So all these influences keep coming in, and the ingenious cooks and home cooks and chefs, they take all these things and they make new things. And I think we'll see a lot more of that. I think we're already seeing a lot more innovation as far as what we could call Jerusalem cuisine.
And I guess a nice question to end on. So you were a member of the Club Chef de Chef, which is chefs that have worked in national governments. Is that accurate?
Specifically for chefs to heads of state.
Okay. So in that, you met with other such people from around the world.
Yes.
What were some of the things that they said or their perceptions of Jerusalem and or Israeli food that you remember that stick out in your mind?
I think everybody was very excited about what's happening in the food scene here, the excellence of the food we offer in this country. And it's starting to gain recognition even amongst these top chefs. You know, I think we're still young as far as having a global impact in our cuisine. But because of the innovators, because of the quality of our ingredients, because we can mostly locally source everything, and there's a lot of organics, and the Tivoni movement, the vegan movement here is so strong. Like, we're starting to influence the wider world in our cuisine. You know, I think it'll be a while before we become as iconic as French cuisine, but I think we have, because of the advantages of being here, an opportunity to rival eventually as we develop our own unique cuisine, which is developing. We're creating our Israeli cuisine right now, and it hasn't yet fully become defined, but it will. It has to.
In the interview, you heard me mention shamburak, a dish from a restaurant here called Ishtabach, and I wanted to talk about that too because it is a genuine Jerusalem Jewish food. It was invented here in Jerusalem by a member of the local Syrian Kurdish community as a way of repurposing Shabbat leftovers. What it is a flat disc of a really good bread dough. On top of that goes an awesome mashed potato, and on top of that goes meat. That's where you get your choice. You got about 10 different options. And then on top of that, they put some nice vegetable topping, close up the ends of the bread so it's kind of like boat-shaped, and that goes into a brick oven for about 10, 12 minutes. When it comes out, it's crispy, it's filling, it's delicious, and it's not particularly expensive. Obviously, in the restaurant, it is not leftovers. That's just how it was originally made in the owner's mother's house. It's a really good food, and it was invented here in Jerusalem. So don't let it be said that there's no such thing as a genuine Jerusalem Jewish food or a genuine Israeli Jewish food. There are plenty of them, and I've mentioned to you now 3 here in this episode. So with that, let me first of all wish you a happy Yom Yerushalayim. Also, for those who will be celebrating Shavuot or Shavuos, as is often said in America, I wish you a happy Shavuot as well. My next episode, we will be discussing a food that some of you may not have heard of called kashkarikas, and my guest will be Sibel Pinto. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Got any questions or comments? Please feel free to email me at jewishfoodbook@gmail.com. Please listen, like, and follow wherever you get your podcasts, and I would truly appreciate it if you'd share this with other Jewish food lovers. The theme music you hear is Adir Hu Revisited by Rebbe Soul. Check him out wherever you stream music. And as always, until next time, I wish you B'tei Avon.